And that was the first time in the biggest stage of my life, the biggest game of all games. There's nothing bigger except maybe the World Cup, and I came up short. And so the lessons in that become like, how do you navigate those emotions? I had to, at the end of that, I had to stand up on that podium and talk about it. I'm hurting. I wanted to be somewhere crying. Like, I came up short in the biggest game of my life. Like, I'm thinking, I had my head down. I want my teammates see me like, what could have I done differently? I wanted to watch film. I still hadn't watched the whole game tape, but I wanted to see, what did I do wrong? How did he make that play? And I've seen it enough now, and I'm old enough now that I recognize there's not much more else I could have done. But it's just one of those things where I let that dwell a lot longer than I should have, but it did fuel me and motivated me throughout that off season to get back to that moment. So I took that negative and turned it to a positive. The positive was, it was fuel. I didn't want to disappoint anymore. I wanted to be successful. I wanted to win a Super Bowl.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Catalysts for Change, the show where we explore the stories, strategies, and turning points of leaders driving meaningful impact in their communities and across the country. I'm Adam Lister, and I'm glad you're here. Today's guest is someone many people think they already know, Kevin Dyson, remembered across the NFL and especially Tennessee for two unforgettable plays, the Music City Miracle and the final play of Super Bowl XXXIV, where the Titans came up just 1 yard short of winning the Super Bowl. But the deeper story is what came after the spotlight. Kevin went from first-round draft pick to educator, principal, and now founder of Music City Academy. His journey raises bigger questions that matter far beyond sports. How do you keep one public moment from defining your whole life? What does leadership look like when your responsibility shifts from your performance to the well-being of other people's kids? And how do setbacks become the raw material for service? In this conversation, we talk about identity, reinvention, school leadership, and what it takes to build something meaningful in public, especially when people think they already know you. Let's dive in. Kevin, thank you for being here today. It's good to see you.
Absolutely, man. I appreciate you having me.
I talked a little bit before we started this episode, and as we kind of lead into it, when you hear the name Kevin Dyson, particularly in Tennessee, folks think of a couple of things. And your most famous play even gets a shout out in a movie featuring Tom Hanks. I would be curious, when you are thinking about yourself and how you kind of move and operate within Tennessee, what do you think people assume about you, or what do you know that they assume about you when they hear the name Kevin Dyson?
Well, first, I'll go back to that, to Castaway, the movie that you referenced. I remember when it came out, I had just had knee surgery, so I was injured, and I went to the movies to watch it. And that scene where he mentions, oh, we get this straight, Tennessee has a football team, and they're in Nashville. And then, of course, and they went to the Super Bowl, and the crowd clapped. And then when the lights came up and they saw me, it was like, oh, there's him right there. They're whispering, there he goes, there he goes. So it was kind of a surreal moment to actually kind of be referenced in the movie. And I was with my brothers who were in college at the time, and we had no clue that was going to be referenced in the movie. And then, of course, everybody kind of like, oh, there he is right there. So it was kind of a surreal moment for me. But I think, man, to your question, obviously sport is timeless in some regard. I think especially sports heroes, how we resonate, how we remember special moments that people remember. It's hard to people to overcome those moments sometimes when something, especially when it comes to entertainment or sport, that people resonate still with that, even though it's 25 plus years now. And I think people still have that in their head in the context. Now, people still call me Dr. Dyson. They know all the things I've done. But when I meet people genuinely for the first time, usually is, man, I remember where I was, and I love it. And it's been humbling throughout the years. It's been fun. I've heard so many dramatic stories, so many fun stories of where people were during some of those iconic moments. And it's just been a special journey for me. I mean, I was, like you mentioned, I was a first round draft pick. I had a lot of injuries that kind of derailed my trajectory, and to have something that people still talk about 25 plus years later, I guess it's 26 years now, it's humbling, and it's something I'm appreciative of, because there's a lot of guys that played with me, played before me, are currently playing, and will play after me that nobody will talk about. Even though they've helped their teams win, they've had good careers. They've done a lot of different things in the community and in sport. But they won't have those iconic moments where people will forever remember them and be forever immortalized in some regard. And to be able to have something like that is very special to me. It was an accident, and I happened to be in the right place, right time, sort of thing. But I'm very grateful for those moments.
I I think, metaphorically, but also literally, you talk about being called Dr. Dyson. My guess is that almost all of the kids that have passed through your hallways that know you as Dr. Dyson will remember you forever for reasons that have absolutely nothing to do with a football game.
Absolutely nothing.
But I'll share my story if you'll indulge me for just a brief moment. My brother and I was a freshman in high school. He was
Mhm.
in eighth grade, and we would come down and sell parking spots for the Titans games
Oh wow.
for our high school, and then buy tickets for cheap from scalpers and go in and watch the game after usually missing the first quarter. But I remember coming down with my brother and my dad after y'all beat the Jags,
Mhm.
and you did basically a little pep rally at the
Yeah.
stadium. It was 1 o'clock in the morning, freezing cold in December, but one of the coolest memories I
Oh
had with my
man.
dad and my brother. And that, I think, what was so special about that was you all were able to immediately develop a real connection to the
Mhm.
city and to the culture of
Mhm.
of this community, and people kind of bought into what you all were building almost immediately, or
Yeah.
at least we did in our household.
Yeah.
And I think it's you talk about sports and how it connects to life in a lot of ways, and I can see how, as you think about building into the next versions of who you are professionally and the things that you're starting,
Mhm.
just how important it is to get it right from the beginning.
Yeah.
If the Titans don't have that connection to the city and build that sort of relationship,
Yeah.
do they have the commitment and the loyalty that they would have, 20, 30 years later?
Yeah.
That organizations, whether they're sports or education
Yeah.
institutions, have, because they really invest in building that relationship with folks.
Yeah. I appreciate you saying that because, again, being here as long as I have now, this is home. This is the longest I've lived in any community as far as Nashville, Middle Tennessee, for majority of my adult life. I moved here at 22, almost 23 years old. I'll be 51 in June. So just give you context of how long I've been here. And to this day, people are Titans fans because of that team.
Right.
People have left their other teams because of that
Yep.
team, and that roster, those guys on that roster, people still remember and resonate with those guys. And what's interesting is we're all getting older. Like I said, I'm in my 50s. I was 24 years old when all this went down, and the people that are around they were around that age. Like you said, you were younger, they're around their 20s. Now they're in their 50s and their 60s, and they're passing this down. And the younger guys, they hadn't had the younger generation of fans, hadn't had that same kind of instant success that we had to build this up. And we were intentional. The franchise was real intentional. The players were real intentional. We drove from border to border. We went
Yeah.
to Kentucky, Illinois, parts of Missouri. And of course we went to East, West, and North Tennessee. We went all over the place. We really were intentional with spreading the brand and being visible to fans and really building that fan base. And I think that was a unique experience for myself every year doing those caravans and going to East Tennessee, or even I went out to Clarksville one time, which doesn't seem like it's far, but
Yep.
from a city standpoint, it is kind of out there. And just building, just seeing the love and the compassion that people have for that team and me and my teammates, that was fun, man. And I think that is why Nashville has become home for me. It's provided me some opportunities that I don't know if I moved back home, I would be afforded the same opportunities, especially for the things I've been a part of. And I think a lot of guys have made this home. A lot of guys are making this home that never even played for the Titans,
Yep.
but let alone the ones that were part of that special run. There's a lot of us still here, still making this home, and for a lot of different reasons. And I would venture to say the main reason is the community and how they embraced us.
You talk a lot about just the building that relationship and
Hmm.
kind of and going border to border, and hadn't really thought about it literally until just now, but you had to give people a reason to follow this team.
Mhm.
Because what I think folks also forget is the same year that the Titans came to Tennessee, the Vols went to the national championship.
Sure did.
So Tennessee already had a football team in a lot
Mhm.
of ways. And I want to think about a little bit about your mom.
Mhm.
And because I think what you're doing and what you talked about doing, going border to border, feels like a critical element to building and laying down a solid foundation for Music City
Yeah.
Academy, as you're giving people a reason to come to you to take care of their kids. Um, and I think about your mom and the things that you've said about her in the past and what I've read about her, that she pushed you to take education as
Yeah.
seriously as ambition. What part of her voice, as you're thinking about this phase of your life and essentially a second phase of your education career,
Yeah.
still resonates with you?
Oh man, I appreciate that question. You know, like I said, I'm 50 something years old and still trying to do stuff to impress that woman. I want to make her proud. I want and she tells me, I'm proud, boy, just sit your butt down somewhere. That's what she'll tell me. And it's just one of those things. I saw the sacrifices that she made for us as a single mom, the work that she did, the going without that she did, and without sleep, without food, all the things just so we can have. I also saw her humble herself where she couldn't afford to provide us with some things, and so my grandmother would step in. I had families, and I wrote about it in my book. I had a lot of families that gave us support as surrogate families that would help me to get to the travel soccer game, the travel basketball game. They would let me stay with their families. They would drive me down, and I venture to say my mom couldn't afford to give them anything other than her oldest baby. And, people wanted me to be part of things. I was, one of the better players, obviously, and they wanted to be a part of it. And so they found ways to get there. And so my mother, man, she's always been one of the biggest impacts, biggest influences on my life. There's probably times I've disappointed her, but I like to believe there's been a lot in my life that I have accomplished that has made her proud. When you talk about that 12-year-old kid that went to her, 11, 12-year-old kid that went to her and said, Mom, one day I'm going to the NBA and I'm going to buy you a house. That was my dream from a very young age as a preteen. And that was my focus and my goal. And, not, I didn't always get it right. I challenged the notion. My mom said we had to have a B average or better, and I challenged that. But eventually, because of that challenge, and she took basketball away from me, I righted the ship and I figured it out. And that's kind of what has fueled me since, even now creating a school centered around that ambition, that joy, that love of sport, and providing that access and to kids who that's their ambition is being around the world of sports. I wanted to be a player, and that's all I saw. That's all I recognized was the athletes on the court or on the field, not realizing there's literally an ecosystem of opportunities in the world of sports that's not related to just playing. And then had I had that access or knowledge, I might have been more engaged in school, even more so than I was, and I did decently.
You've got a quote on the website, and I'm going to read here
Yeah.
from Plato. In order for a man to succeed in life, God provided him with two means: education and physical activity, not separately, one for the soul and the other for the body.
Yeah.
But for the two together, with these means, man can attain perfection. And I think about, as you're talking about these sorts of things, both from your mom and as your experience
Yeah.
as sports, somebody that performs at an elite level, I think about all of the lessons that we bring to our kids too, that
Yeah.
sports are fun. They're there to teach you a lot of things,
Yeah.
but we're entering a phase in our life where they're becoming more competitive. And so we've got tryouts and we've got competitions, and the things that we talk to our kids about often are like, I can't want this more for you than you want for yourself.
Mhm.
And the work ethic that shows up in those moments, that also shows up in the classroom, is something that has to ultimately we can talk to them about,
Yeah.
but they have to see that connection. And I think one of the things that's so interesting and exciting about what you're doing, and what I think is so exciting about the charter school movement on a personal level, is the ability to take a core objective, get
Mhm.
kids a great education, particularly kids that may not have the opportunity to get that education, but also do so in a way that gets into more of a niche or specialized
Yeah.
environment. And I think blending those two things together what I read when I read about the academy is it's not just a sports school,
Mhm.
but the lessons that we pull from those experiences in sports, the discipline, the
Yeah.
focus, the hard work, transcend into other things that we do.
Yeah.
We talked a little bit about you being a first round draft
Yeah.
pick, and I can't even imagine both the enthusiasm and excitement and stress that comes with sitting on the couch on that day. I'm always amazed at how calm and collected some of these guys
Uh-huh.
are, at
That's
least
on the
on the
outside.
outside.
That's
Yeah,
on the
at least on
outside.
the outside.
Yeah, I feel like Eminem on the outside look calm and ready,
Right.
but on
Yeah.
the inside, it's a lot different, you
Yeah.
know?
And then I think too, you get your name called,
Uh-huh.
and uh you realize that that's just the beginning of a lot,
Yeah.
a long, long journey. When football became for you more than just a dream,
Yeah.
and I'm sub planning kind of football in the NBA and buying your mom that
Yeah.
house, but part of your identity. Um, and even before the Titans, you were famous for the catch.
In
But
Utah.
how do you think that you have been able to kind of form your leadership theories around these really important moments in your life that have been
Yeah.
singular, but then take those lessons and extrapolate them into something that has sustainability?
Well, man, I love that question as well. I mean, I'll take, for instance, the Music City Miracle, something that I'm probably the most known for my athletic um, life. It was a play that didn't go as designed. Even before that, I wasn't supposed to be on the field, and it didn't go as designed. I wasn't supposed to want to catch the lateral, let alone be the one that ended with the ball in my hand at the end. And yet it worked successfully. It propelled us to victory and move on to the next round. Where you fast forward 3 weeks where I'm in the progression, the ball goes where it should go in that moment based on the coverage, and I'm supposed to be there and it doesn't work. And the dichotomy of all that is that's how life is. And I compare it to golf in a lot of respects. You can hit the best tee shot of your life, feel flush off the club, and it gets one bad bounce, and now you're in trouble.
Right.
Or you can hit it terrible, shank it, and it gets a bounce, and it hits perfect into the fairway. And that's kind of how life has been for me, and that's how sport is. That's how life is. You just kind of have to enjoy whatever that moment is, and be appreciative of it, but you can't dwell on it. You have to move on to the next one. If you're fortunate enough to be 6 feet above the very next day, you take the opportunity to be better than you were the past day. And that's kind of where I'm at, and I didn't always get it right. And, 2020, when I lost my father, I think I had a lot of resentment towards him. And then after that year, and that was at the heels of COVID, I had a different appreciation for life in a sense that, well, I'm holding on to resentment and anger and all these things, and even stuff centered around myself that I had from being a first round draft pick and not accomplishing the goals that I have, and feeling that I let my family down, let my teammates down, let a city down because of the injuries that I amassed and not producing the way I thought I was capable of, and holding on to that after my father passed, man, it just put a lot of things in perspective. Like, time is too short. Like, why am I holding on to these things in basically in some ankle high water, trying to get through life, as opposed to letting that stuff go and moving forward and trying to help people understand it and lead them through that way. So all these things have helped shape my leadership, and I always get it right. And, I think that's why I challenge myself in a way. I could have sat at Centennial High School, continued to have success. We were having success. We moved the needle a little bit, and I could have sat there and continued to do that for the next however many years until I decide to fully retire. Or I can take another challenge to probably embrace some kids that are similar to myself, who has ambitions around sport, who learn a different way, who can't necessarily be successful in a traditional classroom and translate that into quality grades or quality stuff, who don't even have a like identity at the school. They just do it because they have to. There's nothing that brings them there. And so when I think about leadership and all the things that sport has taught me, it's just like, man, all these things that you mentioned about how football teaches you resiliency, compassion, work ethic, all the things that sport, and it's like, how do you spread that? And I feel like the old man sometimes, we say, man, these kids these days, they don't, because we talk about as you're embracing going to the travel season, it's getting more expensive, and really literally sport has become big business. As
Mhm.
when I was a kid, it was big business, but not to the extent it is now. These coaches are actually making tens of thousands of dollars doing travel volleyball, baseball, soccer, and all these different things. And so how do you instill those work ethics in kids when they have access to everything we didn't have? We learned our game, we got our skills by playing pickup games. We
Right.
didn't have access to everything. We actually had to go out and play and learn the game that way. We was playing pickup basketball, pickup football, pickup wiffle ball, pickup baseball. We even did soccer and flag football, all those things we did. But now they can do that on the video game and play all these sports and play it pretty detailed almost. And so how do you instill those same work ethics and things of that nature into a younger generation, and that might have those ambitions? And that's the thing about the elderly, if you will, the old us elders, us older folks, is, I didn't understand that as a young man. When you get a no from your parents, you think, oh, they trying to prevent me from doing this, but really they understand life. They've experienced it, and they're trying to help you with your experiences because they are experienced. That's why we have our elders. That's why we have people who have lived life. And it's the old adage where you catch the person on their deathbed and they say, what have you learned about life? What's important to you about life? And none of them say money. None of them say my job, my titles, none of that stuff. They talk about family and love and the impact you have on people. And I try to keep that in mind. Now, do I always get it right? Absolutely not. I think we all have that in mind. Sometimes we read stuff, but I think I try to keep that at the forefront when I'm doing something now. Is like, this is all temporary. And so it's about having an impact. And that's one of the reasons why I transitioned to this. Is like, how can I have another impact on what I have been doing? And I've been doing halfway decent, but okay, what's the next trajectory to have another impact on kids as I go forward? Because at the end of the day, yeah, maybe they'll show those plays when I pass. They probably will, as long as the NFL's still going. And maybe I'll have some kids that come to my funeral and talk positively about me. But that's the ultimate dream, right? Is the impact you have on others, and trying to be mindful of that, and realizing that life is short. Like I said, I'll be 51 in a few weeks, and you recognize and you hear it. I've heard this growing up, and now I'm saying it is like, yeah, I recognize now I really do have more days behind me than ahead of me.
Yeah.
The average life expectancy of a football player is 59 years old. And not, I plan on living a lot longer than that.
Yeah.
Let me put that out there. I plan on living a lot longer than that. But that's a reality. And so with your time you have left, what are you doing with it? And that's what I try to be mindful of that. And it's so easy for me to talk on this podcast about it, and I've been thinking and spew it out for the audience, but it's just another thing to live that every day. And some people seem to do it better than others. And those people I really envy, because they seem to be just really, man, enjoy your life, because tomorrow's not promised to any of us. And I gave the story about my father, and I was just like, I held on to so much about him that, and when he passed, I was like, man, I'll never have the opportunity just to pick up the phone and call him
Yeah.
again. And you take stuff like that for granted.
Yeah, you really do. I walk through that exact same journey on
Mhm.
a pretty regular basis. But you think about impact, and I wanted to ask you a question about healing in public ways,
Yeah.
but I want to kind of pivot that a little bit to think about how you're going to share that with some of your students. But I'm also thinking about, I mentioned to you, my wife is an educator, a school principal, and I have been in rooms with governors and presidents and Grammy winners and actors and any
Yeah.
person you think could be of a person of significance.
Yeah.
And those are exciting moments. And uh, there's a tendency to want to feel like, man, you're somebody because
Yeah.
you're in this room. But I can't tell you the number of times we've walked into a restaurant in Williamson County, Tennessee, and there's a hostess at the Perry's that was like, I remember you. You were my third grade teacher.
Yeah.
And then you get, like the nice table, or just the smile on a 25-year-old kid's face, because you as a 25-year-old, or in this case, my wife as a 25-year-old, was the teacher that they remember for the last 15, 16 years that inspired them to do something else. And you think, well, God, I'm pretty
pretty
sure.
special.
Yeah, it is. It's
Yeah.
great. But because I can guarantee you that president or that governor, they don't remember who I
No.
was or what role I had in that process. But that 25-year-old kid that's in college now
Yeah.
remembers my wife
Yeah.
from a classroom 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And that level of impact is incredible. And so my guess would be, many years after 59, you're probably going to have more of those stories. The Tennessean will write the story about the Music City Miracle, but you'll have a bunch of kids in there talking about, I remember when Dr. Dyson caught me in the hallway and changed the path that I was on. I would love to know, one of the things that I find so interesting about the Music City Miracle and the Super Bowl is you talked about in a period about 3 weeks, you go from the highest of highs to the lowest of lows. And I would be curious to think about how you take those lessons and help the students or the people that work for you as you're building these leadership lessons. How do you help them heal from moments of disappointment, particularly when they're public?
Yeah.
You are a mini celebrity in a school, and you oftentimes will have public successes and public failures.
Yeah.
How do you help your team and your students learn and heal from those quickly and stay focused on the mission?
Yeah. It's interesting because football or sport in general, you learn that you have to have a short-term memory in a lot of respects. But as much as it is having a short-term memory, the more long-term it becomes, right? That was literally a few seconds, a few moments of my life, talking about cutting up a yard short, a few moments in life, and it has stuck with me all these years. So much so that I got like stress blisters all through my mouth. Like to this day, the dentist I used to go to was like, I've never seen anything like it. I thought I literally let down everybody because I didn't come up short. And there was always this other side of it, me versus Randy Moss. I was the first receiver taken. He was the second, and he's having this phenomenal career.
There's a
and
clickbait narrative there.
Yeah,
too.
exactly. And then here I am coming up short in the biggest moment of my life where, most kids, when you talk about growing up, especially in the 80s, and you get the ball in your hand and you got the basketball in your hand, you got the timer off your head and you're going 5, 4, Kevin has the ball on the left wing, and you're doing it in your head and the buzzer goes off and you make the shot. And that's kind of that iconic moment in real time for a 24-year-old kid. And that, from far as I can remember, that was the first time, and I think the only time, that I wasn't successful in a moment like that, which is weird to even say as much sports as I played. Now I'm talking competitively, like, right? And that I wasn't successful. You mentioned the play of the catch I had in the University of Utah. There's another one. There's a few other ones I had the same thing. High school, I can go back to some other plays and things that I made. And that was the first time in the big stage of my life, the biggest game of all games. There's nothing bigger except maybe the World Cup. And I came up short. And so the lessons in that become like, how do you navigate those emotions? I had to, at the end of that, I had to stand up on that podium and talk about it. I'm hurting. I wanted to be somewhere crying. Like, I came up short in the biggest game of my life. Like, I'm thinking, I had my head down. I want my teammates see me like, what could have I done differently? I wanted to watch film. I still hadn't watched the whole game tape, but I wanted to see, what did I do wrong? How did he make that play? And I've seen it enough now, and I'm old enough now that I recognize there's not much more else I could have done. But it's just one of those things where I let that dwell a lot longer than I should have, but it did fuel me and motivated me throughout that off season to get back to that moment. So I took that negative and turned it to a positive. The positive was, it was fuel. I didn't want to disappoint anymore. I wanted to be successful. I wanted to win a Super Bowl. I wanted to get back to that moment. I wanted to score that touchdown. And that was what I was able to turn that bad into a good. You said earlier, man, it was just turn that setback into a comeback. And that's kind of where I was focused in on.
Yeah. You have contrasted with being a player that your responsibility was with you. And you've talked a lot about the team, but I know that a lot of that is, am I showing up? Am I conditioned well? Have I stretched? Have I done everything I need to do? With being in a school where you're taking care of other people's kids. When did that shift become fully real for you?
Yeah. I think one of the greatest opportunities and greatest responsibilities is educating. I taught for a few years. I've been in administration more than I actually was a teacher. And that's why I support teachers so much. And this is why I appreciate what they do. I don't think the common community recognizes how much and how much time and how much energy and effort teachers pour in to other people's kids. So much so sometimes their own kids get neglected, right? And this is coaches as well. Like I can remember being a coach and literally my son was born and I would see him Sunday evening and maybe Saturday afternoon because what was I doing? I was coaching and he'd be asleep. When I get home, I'd be watching film. I'd fall asleep because I'm tired. Like I just missed a lot of his young life because I was with other people's kids. And I don't think general public thinks about that sometimes, the sacrifices that teachers make for other people's kids. And it's not because, oh, I have to. It's a joy to give out this information. It's a joy to see that light bulb moment. I remember my first year coaching football. I was at Franklin Road Academy, small Christian school here in Nashville, and I got to coaching kids. And when I was seeing them grasping me, teaching them football, teaching them routes, teaching them footwork, hand placement, and how to block, and all the different things that come with playing wide receiver and even DB. And I saw that, I was like, I like that. Like I just got this joy immediately of being able to share what's been in me for all these years into somebody else. I can see why coaches do it for as long as they have. There's a joy that you get to have a part in somebody else's success. And teachers are the epitome of that from the time you are 5 years old to you graduate high school, as you mentioned with your wife, the impact you can have. And I would tell my teachers as a principal, you're going to be remembered for the most part. The ones in the middle, some kids, maybe some won't. You might have a couple impact, but kids are going to remember your teacher for two reasons. The ones that were terrible, that couldn't stand, that had no relationship, just was there and didn't pour into the kid, and then that other teacher sound like your wife was, the one that poured into him, the one that built relationship with him, the one that made him feel like they can do anything, make it possible. For me to have somebody like Lynn Smith, my English teacher, she poured into me. She said, Kevin, you're not a dumb kid, you can do this. And she helped me, and she helped me raise up my ACT scores, different things like that. And those are the teachers that you remember from other end. The ones in the middle, I could probably ask you who's your favorite teacher, and you'd be like, oh, here, who's the teacher you did in line? You're like, yep, that one too. Then the ones in the middle, like, oh, they were cool, but and that's life. And again, this goes back to the impact you have, and it's going to be the kind of that same notion is if you have impact on people, it's going to be one extreme or the other. Either the impact, that interaction, that meeting is going to be negative, and they're going to go back and talk bad about you, or it's going to be on the other side. And I hope I have more to the positive side than the negative, and that's the kind of the key of life.
Yeah, you're so right when you mentioned the terrible, the middle, and the best.
Yeah.
I'm immediately starting to file through and immediately Carol Scruggs, third grade, Granbury Elementary,
Yeah.
Chandra Williams, John Overton High School, best teachers I ever had.
Yeah.
I won't call out the worst, but I remember them, and they do it. It sticks with you, and having those moments, to your point, it's interesting because you are remembered for better or for ill in certain ways. You, in 2020, you referenced this a few minutes ago, were leading a school during COVID, navigating your father's death, and also deciding and grappling with how to speak about race. The country is grappling with, and in many ways still grappling with, how it confronts issues of race and identity and culture. And you are leading a school when all of these issues that exist in the community also exist in a school. How did that season of life change how you approached leadership and how you thought about important conversations that high levels of emotional touch points?
Man, that's pretty profound, man. Listen, I spoke to my superiors and a few other principals specifically about that because they were trying to navigate it too. I think they had a heart for what was going on in abroad, specifically with police brutality. I was having students reaching out to me to speak at rallies. And I one of my big regrets is I shied away from it. I didn't want to be the face of it. I didn't want to stand out. And I recognized my name carried a little weight, and me be able to speak to it would maybe help bring a little more impact. But I shied away from it because I'm the principal of this middle school, and I didn't want to be standing out like a thorn. I already did. I was one of few African Americans in the school building anyway, in a school system that doesn't have a lot of African Americans anyway. And so I didn't want to be that angry black guy coming out and saying, man, we got to do better and all that kind of thing. So I kind of shied away from it. But I did send a note out to my community, my family and parents. And I'm saying, listen, this impacts me a little bit differently than you possibly. And I even told someone else that, like, this impacts a little bit different. I have to fear for my son who's growing up in these communities and him being perceived as a threat and being judged based on the skin color and getting a response that might be at that time that might cause him to be injured or worse, in which we had seen especially that 2-year stretch or so,
particularly around Minneapolis with George Floyd.
Yeah, and that was one of the main evils around George Floyd incident. And so, and I was having these conversations with other administrators that don't look like me, and of course my superiors didn't look like me either. And we were having these conversations, and we were all trying to figure out how to navigate, how you speak to your faculty. Do we talk about the elephant in the room? Do we leave it alone? And everybody had a heart for it, and everybody knew it was hard and was sad to talk about, but it's different when you look like the victim in a sort of speak. And so I shied away from it, and that's a regret that I have, that I kind of shied away from it because I had an opportunity to use my voice in a different light, to shed light and maybe bring some compassion to it and put perspective on it, put a face to the situation, make you understand, like, I got a son I'm raising, and he might be in a situation like this and be prejudged by what's going on. And even myself, having grown up, having been in Utah, having been not to that extreme, but being in a situation where I was with a group of friends and we were being judged based on how we look compared to the other car down the road, right? And so it was just a different level of leadership, of compassion. And one of the things I'm most proud of is, I sent an email out to my faculty, man, I'm here if you want to talk about it. If you have questions, you're understanding. And there was a couple of teachers, one in particular, she reached out. She's like, Kevin, I just want to understand. She's just like, how can I do better? What can I learn? And we and her talked for about 30, 40 minutes, and I just gave her perspective. I gave her my perspective, and I told her, I was like, think about it. How many black kids are in you have 5 classes in the study hall. How many she can count on one hand, right? How many? I said, now think about that. And oftentimes they're the only kid in their class, and they're seeing this on TV. Their families are teared up. Their families are talking about it. And then they come here and that's all they see and all they're hearing. And then some little kid chimes in and says something stupid, as kids do. And then now they got to navigate those emotions and things like that. And they're kids, let alone the adults that grew up through that or feel through that or had their own experiences that are similar to that. And so, man, we had a very, very poignant conversation that I thought was very beneficial. I do wish more teachers would have taken me up on that conversation, because I do believe with change, it starts with a conversation. If you're not willing to have the conversation, then it's never going to change anyway, because we just keep doing what the status quo. We keep doing the same things over and over. History keeps repeating itself because people get scared to talk about it. And that's what I said to my superiors. That's what I said to the other principals that did reach out to me and want to talk about it.
I think you're onto something, that people are scared to do the right thing, or to do the wrong thing while trying to do the right thing. But your story reminds me of one. I tell folks often that no number 2 or anybody below that can understand the full weight and pressure that's on a number 1 until you're the number 1.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking about, in particular, there was a moment that created, it was a catalyst for some real community anger and frustration and sadness. And I was in a position of influence as a leader of an organization that did political work. And we spent our time advocating for certain things. And we used that well. I hoped anyway. Yeah. And I was in a room at one point talking to a group of folks. Ironically, all of them were number 2s or number 3s in their organizations. And they were asking about, how do we use our positions of influence to positively affect certain outcomes? And I had a really honest answer in that moment, is that I have personal feelings about what has happened. I've got personal relationships to an event that has happened. I also have a ethical and legal responsibility to this organization, and figuring out how to expend that influence and that capital in a way that solves the thing that I want to solve, but also preserves it for the thing that I think is also equally valuable and ironically tangential to the
Yeah.
catalyst, was really difficult. I thought I was grappling with it well, but ultimately you don't know if you're making the right or the wrong
Yeah.
decision. The audience was violently in opposition
Mhm.
to my ethical internal dilemma. And what I realized in that moment was, in those sorts of moments when you are trying to grapple with a really complex leadership moment, whether it is a grading issue or a discipline issue
Mhm.
or a funding issue, if we take like the seriousness of these sorts of tragedies out of the equation, one of the challenges with leadership is figuring out how to stay mission focused
Yeah.
there and how to keep the North Star visible. And then also recognize, to the point we were talking about, that there are going to be a whole lot of folks out there that are going to make the Randy Moss comparison, or they're
Mhm.
going to say that you're using your power or your influence in ways that are inappropriate or
Yep.
totally appropriate, or you're not using it in ways that are appropriate or
Yeah.
inappropriate. And it makes me think, you have now had a nearly 20-year career, I think,
Mhm.
in education.
Yeah.
Um, you are a person whose name and face and likeness is well known in Tennessee, and you've decided to start a new venture,
Yeah.
to open up a charter school here in Nashville. My guess was a little bit of learning opportunity to understand just how politicized that process can be.
Oof.
But I'm curious to know, what is the core problem that you seek to solve in young people's lives through Music City Academy?
Yeah.
And how do some of those lessons that you were just talking about show up to make sure that you're more successful than not?
Simply put, engagement, student engagement. I think if there was a number on that, which they do, they have a level of this, right? The level of student engagement in their academics is at an all-time low. Maybe I'm exaggerating on an all-time low, but it's fairly low of most recent. Um, and part of that is the identity to programming, the school, and things of that nature. Truancies up, depressions up, all those different things are up in part because of a lack of engagement and identity to circumstances. I think one of the biggest things and why I have chosen sport, which I love like nurses college. You can go with some things in art. You can go with things in STEM. You can even do culinary. Like there's other avenues to bridge that gap of engagement and some of the gaps academically too. There's definitely I have chosen sport because the lessons that sport has taught me that I feel are invaluable, from even simply put teamwork, how to be part of a team, how to be accountable to the person to the left and right of you, the work ethic, accountability to yourself and making sure you're at your optimal. You know, you got to perform at level. You got to know what your roles and responsibility are, let alone being accountable to the guys to your left and to your right. I think sport teaches us a lot of different things: patience, resiliency. One of the things I've always been proud of as a leader is in those moments that you talked about of adversity, being able to steadfast and be calm because I have been in that situation before, not necessarily, a gun threat or anything like that, but having been in high pressure situations and having to regulate and be calm and not have your nervous system so dysregulated that you can't think, that you can't perform. Because I've always thought if Steve McNair came in the huddle and he was like, "Oh my God, we're going crazy," that whole huddle's gonna feel like that.
Right.
But when he comes in, all right, we're going, let's go. And he comes in calm, and guess what he does? He goes make play after play after play, and then that feeds me, that fuels me, that fuels Eddie, that fuels D Mace, that fuels Yancey, that fuels whomever else, because he has this calm presence about it, like we're going to get it done. And that's kind of that same notion that I feel like sport teaches you, because you have been in those situations that make you feel that you can accomplish whatever that goal is at that time.
Yeah. I think your awareness that you're not always going to be successful
Mhm.
is a hard learned lesson. And sometimes I wonder, I take your example, is like, is it better to have had that moment in a highly public way once, Or is it better to have a bunch of those in less public ways? They both probably suck.
Yeah,
And,
I've had both. So
it's I as we kind of think about this next version of what you're trying to create
yeah,
here, I can feel the both kind of personal and kind of moral calling to reach into these kids' lives. What, as you are thinking about building your team and you're building this school, if you were to think about leaving something 1 yard short
hmm
with Music City Academy or with these kids, what does that mean to you? And how do you reframe what you're building at the school to give the confidence to the parents who entrust their kids there, or to give the confidence to your team that you're going to do everything to make sure you're not that 1 yard short?
yeah. Well, I think simply put, I think once you realize that whether you come up a yard short and you don't necessarily accomplish your goals, as long as you are afforded the opportunity to wake up the next day, you have another opportunity to get that last yard. And I guess I've in my way, I've been searching for that last yard since then. And the kind of reason why the title of, of my book was that in that sense is I want to be qualified, so I was justified. I was always trying to chase my own shadows, my own demons. I was always trying to accomplish to feel like I got that last little bit to be validated for my successes and even some of my failures as well, right? And I think as long as you are afforded the opportunity the next day to get that last little 3 feet, then that's what your goals are. And are you always going to be successful? No, as you mentioned, no, absolutely not. But the idea is, and instill the type of people that have that sense of resiliency can impose them lessons onto kids that they have similar stories. I just uniquely happen to be a former professional athlete who has two moments that makes me memorable to, especially to a community where a lot of these other coaches and teachers have similar stories. I gave you one story about my father and my mother. I've been around people that have similar stories about their father and mother. Their father was in military and what they taught them and the skills, because military, you can translate that into a lot of athletic arenas too. And we often say that we're going to war, we're doing all these things because what? It's team over self. If I'm not responsible, then I'm putting him at risk. And if he's not responsible, put me at risk. And so you have to be responsible to the guy to the left and to the right of you. There's something bigger than you. And I think that's what I want to instill to any kid that comes through those doors, that yes, you have your responsibility and you got to take care of responsibility, but this is bigger than you. It always is. Whether you are the president of the United States or you are as a videographer at a local news station, you have a responsibility beyond yourself. And you got to make the most of those opportunities as long as you afford to wake up the next day. And, being a yard short, and I don't know how my life would have been had I scored that touchdown. I don't know. And there's a reason probably why I didn't. Who knows? But the fact that I can talk about the highs and highs, as you mentioned, and the lows of lows in two different moments within not even a month span. It was 3 weeks, a 3 week span is pretty remarkable. And as I mentioned, I had never experienced that other side. I had always been successful. And to go there and sit there and have to watch that confetti fall and be there in that moment and sit still and listen to all my coach pass come in my head and say, get up. You don't let your enemy, your opponent see you hurt. You get up, you congratulate, and you be humble, and you say congratulations, and you walk off. And that's literally, as I was kneeling there thinking about looking at the confetti, like, I need to get up and congratulate them and tell them good game and go out and be sad on my own. And that's kind of what you do, right? But I've also learned you can't go at it alone. And that's what team teaches you too. And a lot of times I dealt with emotions alone. I dealt with my disappointments alone. I dealt with the fears alone. I dealt with all the adversity alone because I didn't want nobody to know I was hurting. And so I just dealt with it. And on surface you look like you're fine, but deep down you're like, man, I gotta make these plays. I gotta get this contract. I gotta score this touchdown and whatnot. But I want kids to know, man, like there, you don't have to do it alone. That's what sport teaches us. That's why you have a responsibility on your team that you don't have to do it alone. Football or team sport in general, there is a level on every sport that's a team sport specifically that you're responsible for whatever your role is so somebody else can be successful. The quarterback can't do a daggone thing if that offensive line doesn't block. He can't, if he can't protect, if the running back don't pick up the block, he can't do nothing. Now, everybody could do their job, and I drop the ball, one person don't do their job, and then the play doesn't work. But if all guys do their job, then the play has a lot more greater chance of being successful. And I think that is what I want all my coaches, all my teachers, all my administrators, and myself to instill in the kids is, you know, yes, you're going to go through hard times, you're going to go through adversity, but you don't have to go at it alone. And how can you bounce back? What are you learning from this lesson of failure, if you will, whatever that looks like? I'm saying failure, but they're not necessarily failures. But what are you learning from that? What can you take and turn that negative into a positive?
Kevin, thank you for your honesty and perspective and the example that you continue to set through your leadership and service. I think one of the most powerful takeaways from this conversation is that none of us should be defined solely by the moments that the world remembers most, but that real leadership is built in what comes after. It's built in the resilience that you talked about, in the reinvention, in the humility that you talked about, and the willingness to keep showing up and serving others long after that spotlight fades. For many people, you, Kevin Dyson, will always be connected to one of the most memorable endings in Super Bowl history. But what stands out to me after this conversation is not just the moment itself, it's the life and the leadership that you've chosen to build afterwards. From the NFL to education to community leadership, your story is one that is a reminder that impact isn't really measured by one singular play, by one title, or by one season. It's measured by the people you invest in and the lives that you help to shape over time. If you have enjoyed this episode, please leave us a rating and a review and share this conversation with someone who might find it meaningful. We've got more incredible conversations ahead, so be sure to subscribe to Catalysts for Change wherever you get your podcasts, or visit us at catalystsforchangepod.com. Thank you again for listening to Catalysts for Change, brought to you in part by the Southern Research Collaborative. Until next time, I'm Adam Lister, and I'll see you soon.